In the spring of 1109, England was all abustle with the activities of war. But in a twist surely unfamiliar to the newest generation of its subjects, it wasn't a war against themselves. A coalition of Welsh and Irish lords had been defeated, extending Mercia down to the pleasant beaches of southwest Wales. As the reavers eagerly prepared to welcome any sightseers, the English army marched north through ever shorter fogs towards Scotland, where the Duke of Northumbria had taken the liberty of starting a land grab. In Rouen, Robert was teaching his daughter Matilda how to act like royalty. If the peasantry talk back to you, smack them in the face, and absolutely don't forget to spit. When you're older, you'll have people to do this for you. Isn't life great, my little princess? Please don't help your mothers kill me, by the way. After a one-sided slaughter at Carlisle, England grew at Scotland's expense, and Duke Edulf was placed into Robert's debt. His bunch of favours owed and lives spared was maturing nicely, tucked away in a dark corner, awaiting pressing times. By autumn, the realm was at peace, slowly digesting its new conquests and continuing to generally mellow out. When one really thought about it, Robert's limp-wristed rule wasn't all that bad, especially if you just left him alone with his growing family. There was similarly good news for the church, as it heard that the Fraticelli cult had fallen out of fashion in Wiltshire. The clergyman had gone through the Bible again and again with a fine-toothed comb and produced proof of their right to wealth, with only a minimal number of generously broad translation choices. Thus the atmosphere calmed, and somewhere in the wooded river valleys of the western hills, the old King of England breathed a sigh of relief from the mouldy gourd of his luxury hole in the ground. Peaceful times suited peaceful business. Robert was sending correspondence to all the courts of Europe, inquiring after the richest and most beautiful princesses of the age, asking not of their value for money, but their lineage and marital status, for he had a castle full of premium-bred sons. There were so many matches that could be made out there, it was all rather overwhelming. It perhaps should have fallen to Mare to arrange these matters, but Robert was seeing little of her those days. There was just a glimpse in all those weeks when a messenger opened his bedroom door slightly and Robert felt narrowed eyes stabbing his soul from across the antechamber. The messenger, incidentally, was reporting that the newly conquered Welsh were trying to rise up. "Kill them," Robert replied, focusing more on edging his chair out of the demon gaze of his beloved. In winter, a family milestone was passed. Robert of Maine the Younger turned 16 and was granted his county in full. His first big court event was a Christmas feast, to which all of the nobles of Rouen and beyond were drawn, eager to honour, or curse, the heir to the Normandie dynasty. King Robert was rather grumpy though, for it was only on his arrival that he found his boy had gone ahead and acquired himself a wife. She was just some other Norman. Highborn, of course, the daughter of an old traitor from the duchy days. What a selfish little brat. Such a powerful weapon an unmarried heir can be for a king, and Robert Jr. had taken the hand not of a princess or queen, but a mere girl from the next town over. And to say girl is to use the wider definition, for she was nearly twice his age. King Robert sat and watched all fawning over his heir, delighting in his friendly demeanour, his humble yet proud reception of gifts and well wishes, and his mature and stately manner of speech and composure even at that young age. Who was this stuck-up boy? The king wondered. He'd have plenty of time to ponder the answer, for no one spoke to him that evening. He felt quite passed over as he wandered off in the early hours of the morning, the croaky kowtowing of the stable hand confirming that he was at least still visible to other people. On the way back to Rouen he passed a disused inn. It was in a prime position on the main road to the Seine Bridge into the city. There was something greatly alluring and mysterious about the sight, so Robert dismissed his guards and removed his royal robe, immediately taking on the image of a mere bedraggled wanderer. Asking around, he discovered that the old mistress of the tavern had been pressed into joining the servants in Rouen Castle after many died of the slow fever. She had apparently caught the illness herself, attending to some bratish child of that fat king, and never managed to return home. Now her own children lived in the dampening remains of the old drinking hall, making of themselves bardic beggars and stealing a toll from passing merchants. After the mysterious stranger moved on, as chance would have it, a group of men from the city appeared in the village and paid those children a hefty sum to go away. A few noisy days later, and the inn was much more presentable. A painter tended to the new sign hanging out over the road. "The King's Bounty," it read. While a mysterious benefactor sponsored such crafts, the king, surely unrelated to the venture, was working out how to prove to the realm he was still driving the carriage, so to speak. The eventual decision was to invade Brège to the west, making use of his son's stupid curse of true love to press the wife's old family claim to some territory. This led soon enough to a great battle in Evreux, just down the road from Robert's new business. It was perfect. Fleeing civilians make hungry customers. The presence of the King's Guard outside the tavern tempted many to take refuge inside, and soon it was packed with so-called customers, sampling the special grand opening offer, free turnips. Yes, I said free turnips. But then again, is anything truly free? Not in this case. For Robert's evil genius scheme was to salt these turnips so heavily that one would be forced to pay up for the pricey mead to stave off self-mummification. The foolish peasants took the bait, and their wincing faces gave Robert great delight from his stealthy perch atop the roof slats. Below, his guests were to be entertained by a talking wild ass, purported to know the epic poem of Robert and the Manticore. Crisis struck as the creature's voice was cruelly taken away, leaving only a stinking mule befouling the stage before some cynical peasants. They'd seen this act before. Robert tried whispering the poem down through the rafters, but the mule's sudden violent escape from the building drowned out that rasping recital. Things were not set to improve from there, for by now the salted turnips with extra salt, served dans le style de sel, had reached the patrons' stomachs. It was a brief stopover before the speedy return journey to the outside world. Gasping, clawing, and gagging, the crowd tore the doors from the frame and fled the malodorous scene. The guards outside rushed in, before reeling at the buffering explosion of their senses and joining the routed punters. All that was left was a dripping mess of partially digested turnips and bodily waste. From the rafters, Robert was indeed the king of all he surveyed. In the coming weeks he decided to sell the property off, and quite literally wash his hands of the matter. At least he had learned a new technique to get caught to end early. Back at home he heard that his forces had defeated the Brescians and were beginning the westward conquest as intended. But that wasn't the good news. That came with the fall of evening, when the cooks reported that someone had stolen most of the castle's reserve of salt, meaning the freshly hunted meats would have to all be consumed right away, lest they spoil. At the impromptu feast, Robert pressed poor Solène, thin and frail since her months abed, to consume all she could. Solène tried to refuse, for in her teenage years she had become obsessed with maintaining her dainty appearance, and with setting a good example to her people with a holy temperance. However, of all the people in the world, she was the most willing to hear Robert's wisdom, and when he ranted at length about how all the great moments of his life had happened while eating, it inspired in her a change of heart. She would soon rebound into quite the glutton, but whether this truly attracted greatness of anything other than mass is hard to say. By year's end, the war in France was over, and the newly titled county of Rennes was handed to Robert the Younger by his illustrious, industrious, and belter-justious father. He promised much more to come. Indeed, he promised a crown, for while he did not entirely trust the strange man his son had become, he was the scion of House Normandie and firstborn of the world's greatest human being. You may think that a tad overblown, yet the electors of England were starting to agree. A couple of English dukes actually started supporting the idea of keeping the French overlords into the next generation. The fact that elections were allowed at all was still an issue, but taking away such fundamental and long-standing rights required a light touch, a touch Robert was reliably advised against attempting. Instead, he took advantage of the current feelings of goodwill to betray the Duke of Essex. He cancelled the boy's betrothal to his daughter Matilda so that she might instead be joined with a Prince of Norway. With this, it would be easier to keep that recurring Norwegian claim to England in check, and besides, a mere duke was too lowly for the daughter of Robert. The Norwegians refused Robert's obvious ploy, yet his trump card was yet to be played. His daughter would not marry a duke nor a prince, but a king. A young lad had become King of Navarra in Spain, and his minders were happy to make a gesture of peace with England, granting House Normandie another queen-in-waiting in the dynasty. As the year 1111 drew to a close, the minds of the English electors had changed. This was not an uncommon thing. There was constant back-and-forth debate on whether Robert's foreign line had earned another shot at ruling England, especially with so many able Englishmen waiting in the wings. There was no guarantee that when the crown fell from Robert's head, it would land on someone with the same great name. Simply declaring England to be a French-style monarchy was not out of the question, but nothing of the sort could be arranged while England and France both were at war with the Holy Roman Empire. Yes, the behemoth of Central Europe was invading France at that time, and by the same treaties that forced France to win Robert's civil wars for him, Robert was now forced to defend the realm of his old liege, and indeed Normandy if the Germans got that far. Englishmen and Normans alike were summoned to war then, the biggest war that would be seen for many generations before and after, as most were well aware. They weren't the only ones heading for France though. Robert and his family joined Solène on a stately trip to Paris, where they bore witness to her union with French heir Philippe, amid music, dancing and revelling fit for a future king and queen. The wines served were strong enough to facilitate the whole family being there. 4 parents, 7 children. A king, a queen, a regent, 2 queens in waiting, and maybe a king in waiting too. The Normandy clan was not just the Duchy of William the Bastard anymore. Relatively speaking, they just about had it all, except happiness. Mummy Mare and Auntie Agatha both got Solène ladylike weapons as wedding gifts, served with the advice to watch her new groom's courtiers carefully and to strike without mercy. Robert the Elder got them an embroidered tapestry of his own image, great insulation, while Robert the Younger presented a family treasure, a golden diadem that was said to have belonged to their grandmother, acquired at great expense from a far-off land. How far those birds fly, the king noted. It was ultimately something of a happy day for the family, a day of healing and of hope. In history it lies set against the oncoming years of turmoil, in which the future of the English throne would be so violently decided.